I'm from BC, and when I moved here 9 years ago, I did a lot of cycling around the city just to acquaint myself with my surroundings. And I found myself down often riding along the Don River, and having grown up in a fairly rural environment on Vancouver Island, finding myself sort of under this maze of overpasses alongside a very urban stretch of river in Toronto. I think places like that make you wonder what they were once like. What certainly this place didn't always look like this is what sort of jumps to your mind. And I think having an interest in history, I wondered what happened to this place and how it had come to be such a neglected and polluted space. I think most importantly, things like the brickworks, things like those revitalization projects. Todd Morton Mills here is undergoing a transformation. The plans for the naturalization of the mouth of the river. These are really big blue sky ideas for the valley, and I think people are recognizing that this is this gem of a place in the heart of the city that could become kind of an anchor for revisioning what the city can become. And I think the amount of money and dreams that have been poured into what the valley could be in the years ahead is a big change in the last 10 years. Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing for you through your research?
There were a number of things. I guess I was surprised by the depth of the history of homelessness in the valley. One of my chapters looks at how the valley became such a polluted place, and how not only was it a place where the city's sewage ended up, where noxious industries ended up, it was also a place where people pushed to the edges of society found themselves over time. And I thought, certainly you look at the Don now, and it's evident that it is a place where you can still camp in the woods if you have nowhere else to live. And that has a long history, dating back to the early 1800s. And I was surprised to find continuing references all through the past.
So we're down by the river, so tell me about the things that are surrounding us.
Well, this is a spot along the river. We're close to Pottery Road, and behind us is the Don Valley Parkway. So this is a good place to get a sense of how really hemmed in the river and the valley is, and how useful it was as a transportation corridor. So we can see the rail line immediately on the other side of the river, which came through the valley in the mid-19th century. And then behind that, the DVP, which a century later, Frederick Gardner, Metro Chair, recognized just how useful the valley was for kind of punching a superhighway through. So in terms of revitalizing the river valley, it becomes difficult in that it's really constrained by things like highways and railways. I looked at certain places along the river. I didn't look at it was difficult to talk about the river in its entirety, but two of the things I focused on were pollution, so just what was going into the river over time, and actual engineered change to the river channel. And in terms of pollution, it's quite a horrific story in terms of, it starts with mills locating along the river, and I think in the 1850s there were something like 70 mills located along all stretches of the river throughout the watershed. So sawmills, paper mills, and flour grist mills. There was a couple of woolen mills as well, but all of those would have dumped everything that was external to their processes into the waters. But add to the mills further south along the river were much more noxious kinds of industries started to establish, like tanneries, which would have dumped animal waste, dead animals, you name it, into the river. Breweries, soap factories, distilleries were another, and Gutermann-Wartz was actually one of the most notorious polluters of the mouth of the Don and Ashbridges Bay Marsh. And it wasn't because of byproducts of whiskey that was so polluting, it was the fact that they had about 4,000 cows. They fed grain mash. The byproducts of the whiskey created this whiskey production, created something called swill, which was just spent grain mash. They would feed that to the cows to increase their revenues. If you could, instead of just dumping all of your byproduct, feed it to cows, fatten cows, get rid of the cows. There's all that extra income. So they would dump all this liquid manure right into the area around the mouth of the Don, and that caused huge pollution. So things that you wouldn't expect became very polluted.
In your research, when did you see the first initiatives for cleanup of the actual river and the surrounding valley?
It really begins with, from what I was able to discover, with Charles Sorial in the 40s.
Okay.
He creates an organization called the Don Valley Conservation Association. And he was a cottager in the valley, actually. Like at the time when many people were, heading north to Muskoka, Sorial moved from his place at Broadview and Danforth, near there. He would schlep with his family every spring in May, and they would spend the entire summer in the valley, around the area of the forks of the river. They had a cottage there. And he really wanted to beautify and restore the land, so he did a lot of work reforesting his properties. And he hiked up and down both the east and west Don, knew the valley like the back of his hand, and really was the driver behind a lot of the conservation initiatives for the valley. He wanted Torontonians to see the valley as an urban wilderness and an asset. In 1950, the Don is declared by the province as the most polluted river in Ontario.
What is its status now?
It's still the most polluted river in Ontario, yeah. But it has come a long way in that it's not as polluted as it was in 1950, but still, I mean, it's one of the most, I think, if not the most urbanized watershed in Canada. 85% of the Don Valley watershed is urbanized. It's in pavement or under some kind of residential development. So it shouldn't be surprising that it's such a polluted place when you have runoff coming from the highways, oil, pesticides, you name it, landing in the river, sewage. So it's an uphill climb to make this into a pristine river valley.
You spoke about the most recent kind of pollution incident and issue being the snow that's cleared from city streets. Where is that cleared to?
It's hard to tell from here. You can see it from the subway when you're crossing the valley.
Right.
Especially you can see it when the snow is dumped there. But it's at Pottery Road. It's like at one of these. There's a big salt dome, and near there is a big snow dome.
Okay, so we did. That's what I thought. Yeah, we did drive by it.
Yeah, and in 2008, that pile of snow was, as large as an apartment building. It was massive, and it took well into the summer to melt. So when you think about the amount of salt the city puts on our roads and that individuals put on their driveways, when the snow falls and then they come and scoop up all that snow, it's just laced with salt. Not only salt, but dog excrement and oil from the streets. It's very dirty stuff. So when you put that right next to a river and it melts, that's where it all goes. And the Don used to freeze in the early 19th century, but because of salt and pollution, people can't skate on the Don anymore.
Are you surprised by the amount of people that use the trailway?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the reasons why I was so compelled by the whole subject in the first place, is I kind of thought, what a horrible river, why are all these people down here? When I moved here from, I grew up on the Cowichan River, which is a bigger, on Vancouver Island. It's got real river about it, and this river felt like, wow, is this all Torontonians have to call for recreation? I was a little alarmed when I first moved here. But I do think the valley it is a beautiful place, and it is a green place in the city. And the fact that it is a corridor, not only for cars, but for people, in that it does allow you to move through the city in a way that you're not up on city streets fighting against traffic. So I think that it has huge value for Toronto residents, and I think that's partly why people are so attached to making it a better place.